Hi, this is Eric Martin with BoardGameGeek. I'm here with Chris from Ultra Pro, looking at the card game CuBirds, which was originally released by French publisher Catch Up Games, and now Ultra Pro is bringing the game to North America. So, Chris, I think most people will be unfamiliar with this game. I don't know if you can give an overview of what we're trying to do with these birds.
Sure. So this is a great game. This is a great game to play for people who are interested in gin rummy and set collection type of card games. It's a fantastic take on that and a unique look, because when you look at the cards, you're actually looking at this grid of all the birds laid out, and you're playing your hand and choosing which of those birds you want to try and build your flock. And as you can see, each of the birds sort of has a number in the upper right corner, and that shows a small flock and a large flock. And it depends on the rarity of the bird within the deck of how many birds you need to build either a small or a large flock to create your set. And so the goal is you're trying to either build 2 flocks of 2 different types of birds, or you're trying to build 1 flock of 7 different types of birds. And it was just the fast, easy, and casual gameplay that we really loved, along with the beautiful artwork. As you can see, each of these different birds is represented in this voxel style format. And actually, as you go through each bird individually, even if you have an entire set of them, each card is unique. You know, maybe it has butterflies in the background, maybe it has clouds, but it's just such a refreshing, relaxing, enjoyable visual game to play in a sort of casual style of gin rummy.
Okay. So how do we go about collecting the cards? Do we start with anything in hand?
So you each get 7 cards dealt out to you, and then we look at our cards. And so what we're doing now is we're looking at our cards and trying to figure out, so for example, the flamingo. I know for a fact that you don't need a lot of flamingos to get a full set, but the flamingo is also a fairly rare bird. So I might go, like, I'm looking at the board, and there's some macaws. I think I got some of the tall boys. I think I got 3 of those in the hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now what I'm looking at doing, and I see a sparrow. Did I see a sparrow in the hand as well? Oh, a duck. Oh, there we go. All right. So that first one is a sparrow. So what I'm going to do is I would take that sparrow, I would play that to the right of the tall boy in that second row down. Yep. And then I get everything in between. So in between the 2 sparrows, I get a toucan and I get one of the tall boys. And so I grab both of those, and those go into my hand. And then the sparrow slides over to meet up with the other sparrow. And then you flip a card from the top of the deck
to fill that gap.
And then play just continues as we amass different birds in our flock. And as soon as I have, in this case, if I had 6 tall boys, or if I had 9, maybe if I had 6, I might think, I see a couple more on the board. I'm going to hang on and try and go for the big flock, which gets me more points. And so play just continues around the board, or around the group, and with each person trying to make their own sets of their own flocks of birds.
Okay, so Nikki was laying down the toucan to get, she was playing down on the bottom row to collect those other 2. Then we got a couple of ducks. So your hand size is going to fluctuate depending on what you're getting.
Yes. And the other thing is you can also look at the board, and if there's just nothing that interests you, you can grab 2 from the top of the deck and just see what you get. Leave it up to chance.
Okay. So it's interesting. I love the card game element where what you're collecting is not necessarily, you're not locked into. You can change at any time what you're trying to do.
Right. Again, it kind of comes back to that whole gin rummy. You might be going one direction, and all of a sudden you notice someone else is going that same direction, and you pivot and you go to start collecting something else. Or like I said, if a flamingo plops up at any point on this board, I would pivot to try and get the flamingos because they're very rare. And you can see that already right off the deal, I have a small flock. And if I can get a big flock of flamingos, it's worth that many more points.
Okay. So the points are also the size of the flock, or are the points different?
So the points are based on either a small flock or a large flock. I believe it's 1 and 3. I unfortunately didn't read through the instructions before we met today, but I believe it's 1 and 3, and you get 1 point for the small flock and 3 points for the larger flock. And so you are encouraged to go for that large flock. But then the other thing is, if you see someone about to shut down their second flock, you might hurry up and just put the small flock down just so you don't get caught with the cards in your hands.
Right. And you play a certain number of complete rounds until a point total, or just number of rounds?
Yeah, you play 3 rounds until you have, basically you've gone through 3 rounds of someone making either 2 flocks or 1 flock of 7 birds. And then the winner is the person with the most points after 3 rounds.
Okay. So during the break, you were talking a bit about the acquisition of the game. I don't know if you want to relay that story publicly.
So this is a company, as I mentioned, I have a little bit of a toyetic background. So bright colors and cute shapes really appeal to me. So we had met with BlackRock probably the middle of last year, and BlackRock is the publisher of this game in France. And so we had met with them and we were looking over their products, and they brought out this one and we all just kind of like stopped. It has such a fresh visual appeal. And I said, do you mind if we get a sample? Can we take this, play with it? And as I was telling you also at the break, we're a small team of 4, sometimes 5 people. And we all come from various backgrounds of different types of games that we enjoy. So when we get together and play a game, if it's a very focused in one direction, there's inevitably people in our group that are just kind of like, well, it's not for me, but we get the appeal of this. Whereas this is something that we played and just had universal appeal. And that to us is something where we know it's special. We know we want to do something with it. From an artistic standpoint, it really stood out to us. And from a gameplay standpoint, it was just very easy, very casual, very fun to get into. But as you get into it, as I was talking about, you end up pivoting your strategies. So you really kind of play to the level of the group that's playing. It can be a very strategic game if you have a lot of people that are playing very strategically. Or it can be a very simple set collection game if everybody's kind of playing it very casual. And so it's one of these games that just appealed to all of us. And it kind of established the relationship that we now have with BlackRock. And we're looking at doing a lot of cross-pollination between bringing some of our products over to France. Sorry, we have motion-controlled lights here in our office. There we go. So we have
That's right. Don't sit too long in the office.
Started a lot of cross-pollination between us. We've now picked up a few of BlackRock's titles, and we're transitioning some of our titles for them to publish in France.
Okay, interesting. I mean, that cross-pollination is a real aspect of the modern game industry where games don't stay in one place. They will go wherever the potential audience is.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we've learned over the past couple of years is that a lot of people want the games in their native language, and the best people that know their native language and their culture are the people that are living there. And so what we've found is we see such a greater success for the game if we can license it out and let people create the game and do tweaks to it and the translations and all that stuff that's best for their market. And so sometimes that means, like, for example, on Past the Pandas, some of the markets have actually made it a little bit cheaper. Some of the ones are making it a little bit more expensive. and they're adding components that help aid in gameplay, but they're doing what's right for their market.
Okay, that's definitely an interesting challenge to think of when you're managing a library of games. Because, of course, some games are being licensed out, some are licensed in. You have to keep track of what you can do based on whatever your contracts are. I don't know. Is there anything to talk about in general, sort of things that you're looking out for along those lines?
I mean, we're always looking out for great games that have been successful in local markets. And we've gotten a few of those either through the inventor or we've gotten them through publishers such as BlackRock. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is games that have been successful in a given area that maybe haven't gotten a chance to see some other markets that we might have great access into. And it's the same thing. We are also looking for partners that have had success with other games in markets that we don't have as much access to. So that's we really like to develop and foster a relationship with some of the other publishers and inventors, because we know that helps us both, that we're able to give them games that they might not have access to, and we're able to get games that we might not have access to. And we find that it makes the industry better as a whole.
So you mentioned, crossing over to an earlier segment that we did, you have Stoneblade Entertainment that is very much hobby game. Playroom seems much more family mainstream, although there's a lot of crossover with hobby with Killer Bunnies. All the Killer Bunnies line seems to kind of fit in both territories. This is being published under the Ultra Pro brand. So where is that brand being positioned?
Yeah, so Stoneblade is one of the design studios that we work very closely with. So because they're such a prominent player in the hobby space, they're one of the rarities where we co-brand the things that they're developing as Stoneblade and Ultra Pro. The Ultra Pro Entertainment brand for the hobby space are things that we're either developing as inventors or getting from other markets and then are launching into the US. And those are the ones that we're not working with Stoneblade. So Stoneblade is a design studio that we work very closely with and have a long history of working very closely with. And so that's how the kind of three brands end up being juggled around a little bit. And we're working on actually clarifying that, because we know from a consumer standpoint that can be more challenging, seeing all these different brands, and not just from us, but from all over the market. There's brands all over the place, and it's hard to keep track of what everything means. And so that's been one of our challenges going forward, is just making sure that we're firmly establishing Playroom as a family-friendly party game and children's game focus, and have Ultra Pro and Stoneblade as more of our hobby focus, because that's where the hobby gaming community knows Ultra Pro and the brand and the accessories that we've been making for years.
Okay, interesting. I mean, it's a difficult challenge. I mean, I would say that many people probably don't notice it at all, or especially in more of the mainstream market, trying to see who the publisher is for a game. I don't know necessarily if a lot of people will be aware of that, or they will just be like, that's the Bunnies game, and this kind of looks like the Bunnies game. When you're looking at Go for Broke, and you're like, okay, maybe it's the same, and go for it. I don't know. I worked in a game store for several years.
Sometimes when we're talking to larger retailers, they don't know the Ultra Pro brand and they know the Playroom brand. And then sometimes when we're talking to other retailers, they don't know the Playroom brand and they know the Ultra Pro brand. So we're constantly juggling all these different brands and trying to figure out the best one for each game, and then hoping that game fits within that market. And that's kind of the approach we've taken, is that we want the game to speak for the brand, because like you said, in the end, people are going to remember the games. They're not necessarily going to remember the brand. But we hope that if we consistently get games that speak to a certain audience, that people will remember what brand produced that game, and that we will hope to start building that brand recognition, that people know, okay, well, I'm looking for a game for my child. Let's look at Playroom. Or actually I want to sit down and spend 45 minutes to an hour with a good strategy game. Let's go with this Playroom brand.
Yeah. And that's, of course, the value of including a catalog inside a game and other things along those lines. Mention, let's see, I know for Gen Con Online, we're going to have a demo of Deranged, which is coming from Hobby World as the originating publisher, and now Ultra Pro is bringing it to the US. Do you have other Ultra Pro titles that are coming you can talk about?
Yes, we actually have a number of titles coming next year. I don't know if I want to give away too much right now, but we do have other Ultra Pro titles coming next year. We have, I think at this point, we have 3 fairly large Ultra Pro branded titles that we're going to be releasing next year, along with some really cool licenses on the game mechanics. So we're really excited for 2021. We're actually going to be talking about it next week and laying out our map of when we're going to be launching all these titles. And I'm really excited for the games that we're launching next year. I'm really excited for the ones that we're launching this year too. And I don't want to diminish those, but typically we're thinking at least 12 months in advance. And so when we're talking about these were things I was thinking about last autumn. And so I'm trying to remember how they're played and all the discussions that we had around them at the time. And I mean, we're being very judicious when we're moving forward with titles. We're really trying to select the cream of the crop here. And what we want to do is we would rather come out with less titles in a year and make sure that each of those titles are great. And so that's all coming back to the fact that we have some great titles coming out for the Ultra Pro brand that are not Ascension and are not Hobby World. And we're really excited to launch those. Unfortunately, they're still in the oven, so to speak.
Okay, perfectly makes sense. I've talked with many designers before as well who, when they are demoing a game, they have to refer to the rule book because, we went through 12 iterations of this particular step with the particular points for this and that. And yes, things change over time and the core stays the same, but the details might just be lost. Okay.
Yeah, it's the nuances. Like when we were talking about Go for Broke, I remember when we first got it, there were so many things that have remained intact throughout the development. But one of the things that we did tweak was the board and the way that you bounce people back and that sort of competitive element. And it's much the same in any of the games we develop, is that we make little tweaks to nuances and it just enhances the gameplay. But yeah, you're right. When you get to the actual produced version, you're trying to remember how did we decide on that rule again? I can't remember if we kept that in or did we leave it out? And like, it's oftentimes difficult to remember.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just thinking of that idea, people sometimes have the notion that there's a platonic ideal, the perfect form for CuBirds. CuBirds could only be this way. It can be no other way.
Right.
And yet probably many things changed over the course of it until it got into this form. So interesting to see. We have a couple more minutes. I don't know if you have other things to talk about coming from Playroom. Your New York Toy Fair booth had lots of different titles, sort of in unfinished art. One that caught my eye in particular was the burger stacking game.
Funny you mentioned it. I actually have that right over here.
All right, cool. There we go.
Burger Academy.
Who wouldn't want to start playing with those pieces there? Why don't you give a quick overview?
This is one of our. We absolutely love the development of this one. So this one, when we showed it in at New York Toy Fair, I don't think we had finished the card art, but we're really happy with the way it turned out. And you can see some of the card art there. And this is it's one of these. So this is done by a famous game inventor, Jeppe Norsker, who has done a couple other games for us, and he's done some games for other publishers. But he has a very thoughtful approach to his gaming or his game mechanics. So this actually has sort of a puzzly type feel, almost like a Tetris. But it's done in a bidding type of way. So the goal in the game is actually you have 4 plates and stacks of burger parts, and you draw a card, and then you have to think in your head, how many moves would it take to build the burger on the card? And then everybody votes on how many bid, or they bid on their number of how many they can do. And then they everybody turns over their bid. The lowest number of bid gets to try and make the burger. If they can, then they get a little scoring token, which is also super cute. So they get a little scoring token, which looks like a fry. And if they can't do it, then everybody else gets a scoring token. And we have these little bidding dials that look like a hamburger with a bite out of it. And yeah, it's a fantastic game. And one of the things that we really particularly liked about this, and when we were developing it, we certainly didn't plan for everything that's going on right now. But one of the happy accidents that has happened with this game is not only does it play for 6 people, but it plays down to 1 person. So you can use this as a very puzzly type of game. And there's several different methods of playing the 1-player version. You can see like how few of moves you can get based on the card number, or you can see how many cards you can get through in a certain amount of time. But it kind of trains your mind in this coding type of way of, if this, then that type of thought process, all while disguised as these cute little burger pieces. I'm trying to pull them out here.
That's right. Well, if you hold the box up to the
this
camera.
is one of the ones we're pushing very hard and showing in a lot of different locations, because it's so fun and so cute. And these little foam pieces, there's a little cheese and a tomato and then a burger and then a onion. And depending on the complexity level, sometimes you remove some of the lettuce, sometimes you leave it in. It just depends on the level of complexity. This has 5 levels of complexity. And like I said, it plays up to 6 people, 1 to 6. And the nice thing about it is each time you play, the burgers are going to start in a different way. So you might get familiar with the cards after a number of plays, but the setup is going to be different every time.
Right. Yes. I love the name that tune bidding as well.
Yeah.
Seems like a perfect look. So Chris, thanks very much for look at CuBirds as well as Burger Academy, and we'll talk about what's going on at Ultra Pro in general. Greatly appreciate your time here and look forward to talking with you about Deranged on a future live stream. So
yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.